Where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what's it going to look like when we get there? That's a simple business narrative structure that mirrors a classic storytelling technique. The Wizard of Oz, where are we now? We're stuck in Oz. Where are we going? I'd like to get home. To get home, and I need to go see the wizard to help me get home. How are we going to get there? Follow the yellow brick road. What's it going to look like when we get there? There's no place like home. That's the feeling it'll be. It's a classic structure that we can use in business to take some of the driest stuff out there and make it compelling for people to follow along with. When you're able to incorporate that, all of a sudden you become more compelling and a better leader, and you'll see people follow along with what you say and what you get excited about.
This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast where we talk to HR innovators about all things people leadership. If you're looking for places to find about new ways to think about the world of work, this is the podcast for you. Please subscribe from your favorite podcast listening platform today and leave us a review. Rebel on, HR Rebels. Welcome back, Rebel HR listeners. This is going to be a fun conversation today. With us, we have Gary Ross. Gary is a communications trainer, coach, and consultant. He has had a number of supporting engagements, including a communication training program with a proprietary e-learning for a professional services company, consulting and coaching CEOs, C-level executives, and internal communication teams on corporate transformations and integrations, and so on and so forth. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm extremely excited to have you. We're going to be talking a lot today about inside communications. But before we get into that, I'm just curious, what got you interested in the communication space?
My high school newspaper, going way, and I mean way back. I started writing, and I don't exactly remember why, but I started writing feature articles for my high school newspaper in my sophomore or junior year of high school, and they liked them. And there weren't too many edits to it. And I said, well, it seems like I might be good at this. I'm going to keep going. And I started working on more on the high school paper, and I majored in journalism. And after school, I became a journalist and did that for about 4 years, and then got out of that and got into media relations and PR. So the journalism job was a blast, but the life of a journalist wasn't really going to be for me, moving around and all of that stuff. So that's how I got into communications and PR, and then moved up in my career to run communication departments, and really got passionate about internal communications, because that's where you can help the organization and help the individuals in the organization all at the same time. The organization gets a happy and engaged workforce, and the individuals understand what they're doing when they walk in the door every day and turn on their computer every day. And that's what really gets me going about it.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting. And, I appreciate the background. You actually learned how to communicate, and are educated in that space. And we were talking before I hit record about how, a lot of times in human resources, we're expected to know these things, and we're expected to be these internal communication experts, but more often than not, we're just kind of thrown into it, and kind of have to stumble through it. So that is one of the problems that you're trying to solve. What led you to kind of discover that as a potential gap in organizations, and how do you approach solving that problem?
Well, because communication, a lot of people default toward thinking about communication as simply a tactical exercise. Oh, hey, I need an email. And they think of the communication people as the email people. Oh, I have to go to Gary down the hall. I need an email by the end of the day. He can crank one out for me. Well, perhaps, but it's really a lot more than that. The communication doesn't really, you don't really get all the benefit from communication unless you really take a step back and think, okay, what's the job I need this communication to do? Am I communicating to the right people at the right time? Am I communicating in the right place? Or am I communicating where people are? Or are they going to have to go out and get that? And how often is that reliable? So it's a lot more than, hey, I need an email, or hey, I need a video. And for whatever reason, and communications folks This is something that honestly bugs us to no end. It's one of those things. It seems to be those things in an organization where everybody seems to think they know how to do it right, or have done it and has an opinion on it. And I'm thinking, well, I don't go walk down to the IT department and go into the server room and start configuring servers because I know how to do IT, or I don't go down to finance and start reconfiguring their spreadsheets because I think I know everything about finance. So why do people automatically assume that communication is this quick and easy thing that they can just fire off and do? In the business world, that's not the case. It needs to be thought of strategically. And I think HR folks, when they have the feeling that you do, that when you're thrown into this, they get the feeling like, oh, I thought this was going to be easy, and this really is harder and requires more thought than I ever thought, and that the people asking me to do stuff are thinking, and oh, I need help. And that's where communications folks come in. And then specifically for folks who like internal communications like me, that's where I can come in and help communicators and HR folks who are stuck in that position, who get that, that little moment there that says, oh, I need help.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, it's that. And I'm sure many of us listening to this have had that feeling. It's that, like, that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you've got that like email and it's to like everybody in the organization, right? And you're like, did I catch every spelling error? Did I get this? But a lot of times it's, you hit send and you're like, geez, I really hope that this actually communicated what I wanted it to communicate. I hope people read it. I hope it actually does what it was supposed to do. But a lot of times we get so caught up in, oh, I just have to get this email out by the end of the day, that it's really easy to miss the mark. So what advice do you have? Is where, like, because it happens, right? Stuff hits our desk, and it's like, I need you to figure out this communication for me. What's the right approach as you have those sorts of things come up in your day?
Well, there are a few things you can think about. I'll give you one of them, and it's basically three things that you want to think about in any piece of communication you do. And it could be that email that you're asked to write by the end of the day. It can be a one-on-one conversation you're having with somebody, whether it's an employee or your manager or somebody else in another part of the organization. But you want to think about these three things. What do you want people to think? What do you want people to feel? And what do you want people to do? Think that through before you communicate, and that will help you organize your thoughts, and it will help make your communication that much more effective. So, for example, what do I want people to think? Let's say, I don't know, let's come up with something. Let's say we're talking about an office move. There's going to be a move to a new office, and I need to communicate about it. This is obviously very general. I'm just kind of making this up, but if you need to do that, I'm going to say to myself, all right, what do I want people to think, feel, and do? I want people to think that, okay, we're moving to this new office and there's deadlines and there's things I need to do, but the company has thought this through and this is the right thing to do. What do I want people to feel? I want people to feel excited about going to this new office. I want people to feel confident that this is the right thing to do. And I want people to understand that even though this is going to be a degree of effort, that it's worth doing. And then ultimately, what do I want people to do? I want people to do things they need to do on time to move by the deadlines, pack up their stuff and get everything ready to be moved. And I also want them to talk to their coworkers and advocate for the fact that, yeah, this is something that's good for the company and good for us and something that we're going to go forward and do. So think, feel, and do. If you cover off on those things and you find ways to have your communication reflect that, chances are it will be an effective piece of communication and you'll be well on your way. A lot of times, and it sounds weird, but a lot of times we forget that last piece. about what we want people to do. I mean, how many times have we seen an email? Let's say it's toward the end of the year, and we've got only a little bit more to go to hit our financial goals. And we get an email from an executive that says, "Hey, we're 5% short of our goals. But I know you guys can do it. You're the best team in the industry, and we need to finish the year strong. Signed, so-and-so." Okay, well, we got the think part done. We got the facts through that. Okay, we're a little bit short of our revenue, and we need to make things up by the end of the year. We got the feel part done. We want people to get excited and revved up and bought in, and they're ready to go. But we forgot to actually tell people what to do. Right? And we've all seen these notes, right? So we're sitting on the reader is sitting there going, "I'm in, I'm ready to go." But what exactly do I do differently than I've been doing all along? We're not prescriptive enough a lot in our communication. And sometimes it feels, it feels a little counterintuitive sometimes to have to be that prescriptive in the workplace, but sometimes we do. To go and tell people exactly what it is that we want them to do. If we want communication to drive a particular kind of behavior, then we got to lay that out, say what that behavior is, what we want, the action that we want people to take.
Yeah, I love that. And it is formulaic, but it is almost like it tells the story of the communication a little bit, right? There's a beginning and a middle and an end to whatever the platform that the communication is on, right? So that's kind of what that sounds like to me, like the storytelling tactic of.
Well, yeah, you said the magic word, story. So there's another framework you can use when you're getting into something a little bit more complex that you're really looking to get some buy-in for, especially over a period of time. And that's a storytelling formula that's as old as time and is used in a lot of the books and the movies that we've grown to love over the years. And that's because storytelling, it triggers actually a chemical reaction in our mind. It creates an emotional connection, and it gets us more apt to buy into something. And that story framework is basically ask yourself and answer these 4 questions. Where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what's it going to look like when we get there? So again, let's go to our office move scenario. Where are we now? We're in an office. We're outgrowing an office. We need to be further downtown to be closer to our customers. That's where are we now? Where are we going? We're going to move to a new office in this downtown complex. We're going to be closer to commuter rail lines. We're going to be closer to our customers, and we'll be able to make more sales by being closer to our customers. How are we going to get there? We're going to give you all the support that you need to have a smooth and effective move. We're going to tell you about all the new cool things about this new office and the neighborhood around there, and help you with your new commute. And then what will it look like when we get there? That's kind of our picture of success. So it'll look like when we get there, we'll be closer to our customers. We'll be doing a lot more business. We'll be in a downtown vibrant area. We'll be able to attract some additional folks to come work for us. And our office will be on a much stronger financial footing. So by thinking of things, if it's a more of a longer term thing, you're looking for people to buy in on, where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what's it going to look like when we get there? That's a simple business narrative structure that mirrors, again, a classic storytelling technique. Everything from Shakespeare to Star Wars, The Wizard of Oz is my favorite example of that. So The Wizard of Oz, where are we now? We're stuck in Oz. Where are we going? I'd like to get home. How are we going to get there? I'd like to get home and I need to go see the wizard to help me get home. How are we going to get there? Follow the yellow brick road. What's it going to look like when we get there? There's no place like home. That's the feeling it'll be. It's a classic structure that we can use in business to take some of the driest stuff out there and make it compelling for people to follow along with. And when you're able to incorporate that, all of a sudden you become more compelling and a better leader, and you'll see people follow along with what you say and what you get excited about.
Yeah, I love this approach because it really does kind of break this down. I think some people really struggle with this in general, and I think it can be, it can be career limiting in some cases, right? If you don't figure out some of these techniques, and if you're not a great communicator, it can really be detrimental. The good news though is, you can learn these things, right? You can learn to be a good communicator. It's not impossible. So for somebody who's maybe really having a hard time with these sorts of tactics, what are some things that they can do, some tips, in addition to some of these formulas, to just get better at communication and be, kind of be on the track to being an effective internal communicator?
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Well, think about these things for the initially, because that structure will help you get off the ground. A lot of times when we see folks moving into roles where they need to communicate more, it's not necessarily for lack of ability. Sometimes it's lack of confidence. So remember that, to your point, this is something you can do, and this is something that you can learn. If you're in an organization that has a good communications department, work with those folks. If it's, this is also something that I do, that I help people, especially people moving into management ranks for the first time, people in HR and frankly in other parts of parts of organizations as well, learn how to communicate. One of my number one rules of communication, and I have a lot of number one rules of communication, but one of my number one rules is know your audience. So before we go back to that tactical piece. It's a reflex to think about communications tactically. I have to go do this. Well, the communication equation, so to speak, doesn't happen without that audience on the other side. So really take time to think about who it is that I'm speaking to and speaking with. Really should be a two-way conversation. So who is it? What motivates them? What are some of the distinguishing factors of your audience and your stakeholders that make them different, that would make certain things relevant to them? A lot of times it's about communicating the right thing to the right people at the right time. So I'll give you an example. I had a case was working with a client a while back, and they were starting a brand new purchasing system. And this was the head of purchasing, and the purchasing guys, they love their systems, and they were going to have this new system, and it was going to be fantastic. And everybody needed to find out about it. But it wasn't going to go live for another 6 months. And he said, well, no, we got to communicate about this now. And we're like, no, we don't. And he said, no, I'm so excited. We got to talk about this now. And so we did. And we kind of blew it out way too early. So when the time came for people to actually pay attention to it, they had already figured, they had heard about it. They had tuned it out. They had moved on to the next thing. And it actually made it harder for the new system to launch because we communicated about it too early. So think about, again, communicating the right thing to the right people at the right time. And then finding somebody to bounce things off of, whether it's another colleague in HR, whether it's a communications person, another friend in another department. Sometimes we just have to get out of our own echo chambers. And this is something I do, to this day when I'm looking to send something out, especially to a large audience. I get a reality check from somebody just to make sure I'm thinking about this the right way. There's no shame in that. And that's something that we can do on an ongoing basis as we're first learning and adjusting to do this, but also even when we become veteran communicators.
Absolutely. I do that all the time. I'm fortunate. There's a couple of people that's like a safe space. I'm like, does this make sense? Like, and inevitably they're always like, I don't know what you're saying here. They change a couple words here and there so that it's a little bit more elegantly, laid out and so on and so forth. But it's always better. It's always improved. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing you could do, and I go way back and, credit my early high school newspaper time, and I was a journalism major in school, so it helped. But it also goes back all the way to 7th and 8th grade, and my English teacher, Miss Nussbaum, who was really tough, but was a great writing instructor. And I think about Miss Nussbaum often because she was a great instructor. But when you think about writing and organizing your thoughts, sometimes it does help to think like a journalist. And how do you think like a journalist? Look how newspaper articles are written, or when you're listening to the radio or TV news, listen to how those stories are written and crafted. We basically put the lead on top, and then we've got supporting information of decreasing importance as the article moves on. It's called the inverted pyramid structure. And the way that was originally done was, so when you're a reporter and you write something, you have the most information up on top, and you write as much as you can. The least important stuff is at the bottom. So if the editor had to cut it, they would just cut it from the bottom, and you'd still get the core of the story in there. That discipline is still good because, again, it helps you cut through the clutter, and you get to the point a lot faster than if it takes 5 or 6 paragraphs to get to the news of what it is you're communicating about. We see that a lot in the business world as well. A training I do, I have an example of an email that a CEO had sent out to an organization announcing layoffs, and he didn't get to the news about the layoffs until the 7th paragraph.
No.
And right. And it's like, what is this? And so it helps to think along those lines as well, is get the news up top, support it with facts underneath, and then get out when you feel like you've gotten the most important stuff across. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that, but now, that I'm reflecting on, the email that you write and you think, oh, I've got everything in this email. These are 8 perfect paragraphs of all the information that anybody ever needs. And then you realize that literally everybody read the first 3 sentences and they're like, whatever, HR fluff. And then and they miss all the important stuff that really is probably mission critical.
Right. So all the more reason, right, to get stuff up front because of the way people receive communication these days. They're bombarded. They're scrolling.
Yeah.
If they're only going to read those first 4 sentences, make sure you get that important stuff up in the first 4 sentences.
Yeah, I don't know if this works or not, but like at times I've resorted to just like putting like 3 asterisks and then being like, important, please read, and then another 3 asterisks after it with like a flag. It's like this, like, because people will get into that habit of like they'll flag it as important before they send it to you, which by the way drives me crazy because it's like I will determine if it's important in my inbox versus somebody else, right? But it's like, so how do you like? It's like, how do I put like these big buzzers that, hey, you actually need to read this email, right? So how do we think about crafting those messages so that I don't have to send that per my last email message that we all so much love sending?
Well, a couple of things. If it has to be an email, you can sometimes important, please read, that does help. But keeping in mind also, again, how people consume communication, avoid large blocks of copy, bullet things out if at all possible. Only write one sentence or paragraphs of 1 or 2 sentences. So when somebody opens an email, it doesn't look like this daunting piece or, small novel that they have to write, but it's just a list of stuff that they can go through. So that helps. But then think about, okay, does this email have to be an email? Depending on what it is you're doing, should it be a video? Right? Should it be talking points that you can send out to managers for them to cover in their next staff meeting? I'll give you an example of a video a really fun video that I did for a client last year. They're rolling out Workday in their organization. And yeah, I know.
I've been there.
Yeah, a lot of us have been there, and it's a daunting thing, but it can also be kind of dry. And they were in about their second month, I think it was, of Workday, coming up on Memorial Day. And this is a company that's got second and third shift workers. They're working 7 days a week, and so the first legal holiday pay, working over the weekend, all of that. There are going to be some new things that people entering time needed to do for the first time since Workday had rolled out. This was the first holiday that they had. It was Memorial Day. And so we had this whole list of things that if you work this shift, you have to make sure you clock in and clock out and clock back in and all this dry stuff. And we said, well, how are we going to get this across? Because this is important, because if people didn't do this right, they weren't going to get paid on time. So it's important stuff, but it's so dry. So we thought, well, Memorial Day. What also happens on Memorial Day? There's movie blockbusters come out on Memorial Day. So instead of a long, drawn out newsletter, article, or email, we made a video in the style of a Memorial Day blockbuster movie trailer. And it started with, we really did this. And it started with, this is a healthcare company. This is not some, off the wall kind of, this is a pretty staid organization. So we started the video. It had that green screen. This video has been approved for all members of the organization. And then we had the thumping movie trailer music, and we had the words on the screen: in a world where employees track their time, only one company can rise to the occasion. And, and we talked about what people needed to do. And it broke through. People not only watched it, but they talked about it, and they said, hey, you got to watch this thing. This is funny. And so we weren't doing anything not suitable for work, anything that was disrespectful or controversial or out there. It was just another way to break through the clutter and get across some incredibly dry information. So it all goes to say, if you've got this email that you feel is daunting and is just going to get lost, think about, does it need to be an email? Can it be something else? And
I love that. Yeah. In a world. Everybody listen to this right now. They're working on their trailer voice. Right. That would be good. Yeah. It is interesting. And I think about, the context of the world of communication is so different than it used to be, right? I mean, people used to actually read a newspaper from front to back, right? Or at least an entire section of the newspaper. Now it's like we're consuming content in video form, closed captioning, 30-second snippets. Attention spans seem to be just not what they used to be.
And in 140 characters or less or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's like I actually feel like one of the most important things you can do in communication is be concise. So how do we balance that, kind of that, the new school communication expectations versus a lot of times we do have a lot of content to get out there. How do we kind of play off that duality of communication in today's world?
By remembering that not every communication needs to be a T's and C's document. Not everything has to be a contract. Not everything has to be. You can go out with an overview of something and then link to something somewhere else with full details that will satisfy the legal department. Those are very important considerations. I'm not minimizing that stuff, but it does not have to be in your initial communication to tell people about. when you're announcing something. So that is always that's something that I have to remind people about quite a bit. Is that not everything has to be a full terms and conditions, official rules document. We can do the headlines here and point people to that stuff elsewhere. Right? I mean, you know that stuff. And then legal comes down and says, oh, well, that needs to be in there because people are going to think this, that, or the other thing. Okay, well, we'll link to it. But if we put all that in our initial communication, nobody's going to read it.
I think that's
people will trip over it anyway. And so it all goes down to, and I don't like it when communication people come across as like these stuck up, you're doing it all wrong kind of things. That's not what this is about. It's about communication helping to make whatever work you're doing and whatever you need to communicate about, improve the chances of its success. So communication's in a support role for all of this. So if there's somebody out there that wants to put all these unnecessary details in a piece of communication, I'm not coming at it and saying, well, that artistically, that's not a very, very nice way to do it. I'm saying people aren't going to read this, and people are still going to trip up on it, whether or not we put stuff in there or not. And the goal that you want as a business person in the legal department is not going to be achieved because of the way this is being communicated. Let's find another way where we can still reach people and achieve what you're looking to do to make sure all that legal information is out there. So it's coming at it from that perspective, from looking for ways to help maximize people's success rather than being the communication cop and, oh, you forgot a comma over here. Who cares?
Well, we don't have time for the Oxford comma discussion. I mean, I did not realize.
Although Miss Nussbaum, my junior high English teacher, did care about all that stuff, and she would not like me to hear me talk about that. But grammar is important because basic things like subject verb agreement and all of that. But if you miss something here and there, the rules aren't. They're a little more flexible now, and people will cut you a little slack. But this is not about being a grammar cop. It is not about being an editor. It's about helping people succeed, and HR people can do that as communicators. And again, that's something I help people with all the time.
Yeah, and I think maybe to put a good cap on the end of this discussion, that here's the thing: as human resources, we know the team better than almost anybody, and we also should inherently understand people at some level. So one of the areas where I truly believe we can add value is being that honest point of feedback. The person who understands, okay, this person might need some help or some coaching in communication that can help them down the road in their career, that can help us achieve our goals, right? So it's not just about like how do we as HR communicate, it's also how do we help our teams understand what effective communication looks like as well, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. All right. This has just been a wonderful conversation, but I am fascinated to hear your response to the Rebel HR Flash Round. So are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Where does HR need to rebel?
HR needs to rebel by being even more of an advocate for the people in the organization, for employees, to not be so hung up sometimes on policy and look for how they can be the champion of employees. And communication folks are in that role to some degree as well. But I've found that the HR people I enjoy working with the most, they pull out from the policy lingo and all that stuff and look to see how they can be business partners and empower the company and the individuals in the organization at the same time.
Absolutely. You came to the right podcast, Gary.
Oh, great.
You're not going to get any argument from this guy on that
one. Half an hour in, I'm glad to find that
out. Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
Kind of just said it, employees. And because they're the ones I think that they're the reality check for a lot of what HR is doing. Both if you look at it, gosh, on the L&D side, on the recruiting side, even on the employee relations side, certainly on the benefits side, all the different facets of HR. I mean, that's who we're there to work with and to enable. And if we are, if we're interested in doing the course corrections needed to be most effective, then gosh, it's the employees, the people who we're advocating for or should be advocating for. Those are the folks that we should be listening to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing we didn't even get into this, but one of the most important things about effective feedback is that 360, right? Like, did your message land and checking that? And how do you know if you don't listen, right? You don't.
Exactly. And then use that feedback to iterate in the future. So you're communicating better in the future.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Last question. How can our listeners connect with you?
You can reach out to me at gary.ross@insidecomms.com. So that's Gary, Gary, .ross, ROSS, at inside, INSIDE, comms, COMMS.com. Internal communication, e-learning courses on my training website, which is plus.insidecomms.com. I have 11 e-learning courses on there on workplace communication. There's also information on there on live courses that I do both in person and virtually, and then can also do custom e-learning, have our own studio here and put together really whatever you would like. And then coaching as well, whether it's with leaders or folks in HR. So email me, gary.ross@insidecomms.com. Check out plus.insidecomms.com and discounts for teams and all that stuff for e-learning as well. So definitely reach out.
Absolutely. We'll have all that information in the show notes. So open up your podcast player, check it out. There's some really great content out there. And I think it's something that I wish I would have had about 15 years ago. So thanks for putting it out there, Gary. I appreciate it. I could probably use some of the content still.
Well, that's part of what it's for. Even communicators, when we get into internal communication, sometimes it's all we're thrown into learning on the job. And what I try to do is kind of make that learning curve go a little faster.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's good. I think from my perspective, also, there's some really good content here that some of my team could probably benefit from as well. So I'll be checking that out as well. So,
all right, we'll talk.
Gary, absolutely appreciate the time here. It's been a wonderful conversation. Appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Gary. All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.